Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battishill, and I want to know, what's your next move? Hi there, I'm Arlene Battishill, your host and resident provocateur, and I am thrilled to have my guest, Bonnie Bruderer, who is a film and television producer with over 700 television segments and the writer, director, and producer of the documentary Influencer on the social media generation and the advertising industry. Now, the really interesting thing about Bonnie, well, there are many interesting things about Bonnie, but she has a really unique background that most people don't have. And it's so unusual that that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have Bonnie on the show today. And of the things that she is either doing or has done, she has worked as a coach, a highly sought after coach. She has worked with Tony Robbins, Harvey Mackay, and others for years, and has now created something called the Binge Networks, which is a multi-channel media network for creators and brands with syndication on 50 top television networks. And so, like I say, most people don't have that kind of a background. And so I was really interested in having Bonnie on the show today because, I mean, most people don't go around creating their own networks unless they're Oprah. And so maybe we have our new Oprah on the show today. And so I'm thrilled and honored that you've chosen to join me today, Bonnie. So welcome and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Wow. I want you to follow me around wherever I go and introduce me. That was fantastic.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Oh, that's so great. So, all right, why don't we just get started the way I normally start? Let me hear your version of where you're at in your life today in terms of what you're doing and also just in your life in general.
Sure. So today in my life, I live in Brickell, Miami, and I run a media company. It's a very busy, thriving global media company where, as you said, we have a multi-channel network where we feature channels for content creators, be that podcast or video content. And what's different and unique about us is we syndicate that on 50 different media outlets. So in a nutshell, we take people, we get them massive exposure around the world. And so as you can imagine, there's a lot of moving pieces. There's a lot of bits and pieces. There are over 200 people like yourself, Arlene, that have a channel. And we also work with 50 different media companies. So my days are cuckoo, for lack of a better word. You never know what you're going to get. We do a live show every morning. Sometimes I host, sometimes we have some of the other hosts that take the shows. But it's really interesting because it's been a complete evolution, which I'm sure that we will get into. And it's very, I love it because we're helping people get out to the world. But it really is, it does feel like there are dart balls being, shot at you all day long, every single day in all directions. So that's in a nutshell what I do.
And I'm sure that yours has an exponential effect of darts being thrown at you, given just the nature of the business that you're in. I mean, it's one thing to have, an online store where you're selling shit to people, but you're talking about a network and a network of distributing content out to a whole bunch of other places. And that is not a common thing that people do.
It's not. And I can tell you why. After doing it for 4 years, it's extremely complicated, extremely expensive, and extremely labor intensive. I saw an interview with Oprah once, and she said starting the own network was the most difficult thing she's ever done. Mm-hmm. And I thought, what? How hard could it be? And so I sought out and I created it, and I understand now why people say that. And it is, it's a big mission. It's a big vision, and it took a lot of balls to set that out and to even state this is what we're going to do. And we've done it with a lot of luck and a ton of hard work and some tears. And I think even some blood at points. And so it's been an incredible journey. It's been 4 years in the making, and we were really an evolution. I started as a talk show host, very much like Oprah. She was my obsession for many years. She's been on my vision board since 1995, right. And I always wanted to do her show. And when she went off the air, I felt like it was a fail. I felt like, oh my God, I never made it on the Oprah show. Now what? And so for me, I had to set a very Herculean goal behind that. And so that's really sort of what the impetus was for starting my television talk show in New York City. And that's what I did. I utilized my interesting background of working for Tony and Harvey and exposure to, hundreds of thousands of very interesting people around the world. And I created a pilot, and it got picked up on a cable access show in New York City. And that's really how Binge started. And so, it's been a wild ride and a complete evolution to where we are today, running the multimedia network.
Right. Now, okay, I have about 400,000 questions that are
Great.
Just this last paragraph. So let me
Sure.
see how many of these I can get through before I ask you my natural second question for my show.
Sure.
Okay, this is somebody, meaning you, who decides she's going to have a really big goal. Now, most people have big goals, but they don't have goals like this. I mean, people don't just go through life thinking, I should be on the Oprah show. I mean, they have this fantasy of it, but you were working in a way where you actually had the potential to be on her show. And you had worked with Tony Robbins, and that's another thing. Most people do not work with Tony Robbins. Now, what I want to know is, sorry.
I'm like stunned. I'm like, they don't? Why don't people choose those goals?
Yeah, but exactly. Only the reality, and I'm sure everyone listening is saying, what? And so I have to ask you, okay, how does somebody end up working with Tony Robbins, and how does somebody end up with the idea in their head that having the goal of being on Oprah is a goal that just feels perfectly normal?
So let's dial it back many decades. So I really grew up with more Murphy's Law. Like I was good at things. Like I would put my mind to something. I played multiple sports growing up. But unfortunately, I was in a family where it was sort of a weapon. Like if I did great at something, it was a takeaway. If I fought with my brother, they'd say, you can't go to your swim meet, or you can't be in the play. So I kind of got to this place in my life where I didn't really see that goals were something to shoot for and something to make happen, because I felt like when I did, they got taken away, and that just sucked. So fast forward, I'm 23 years old. I went through a very difficult point in my life. My mom was very sick for many months in the hospital and then passed away. And I was just sort of lost. I was at a place where most people were just, all of us were graduating college. Most people were super focused on finding a husband, mostly their college boyfriend. And I had just gone through this life and death experience where nothing made sense. Nothing seemed important to me. I could care less about the Joneses or a white picket fence because I saw a bigger purpose in life. And thankfully, at that time, I had a boyfriend who was very successful, and he was into Tony Robbins. And he saw that I was a bit of a hot mess. I don't even think that term existed back then, but I was, and I was grieving and I was in a lot of pain. And he took me to Tony Robbins and said, "B, you need some help. This will sort you out." And at the time, my mindset was, you know what, this is for people like you, like successful people. It's not for people like me. And he battled me and said, "How do you think I got this way?" And I was like, no. And I went and I resisted. The first time I was there, I was like, this is ridiculous. I'll walk on fire, but just because my boyfriend wants me to. And then I listened, by like day 3, and I had to participate. It's very aggressive and very in your face. And so I just started to participate, and I left that event and I started implementing. I just implemented the things that I learned over that 3-day weekend. And lo and behold, things started shifting in my life. I started to get promoted at work. I went from making I laughed, $18,000 a year. It was my first job at Hornblower Cruises and Events. 19 if I made my bonus. And the next thing I know, I'm making like 33. And then I left that company and I went to work for an internet company and I'm making a 6-figure salary. And instead of choosing to go out and party with my friends, which is what everyone did, it's after work, happy hour. I was training for marathons and doing things that I had learned to set as a goal in that event. So I really credit Tony Robbins for, so much of my life, through what I learned from his organization, but specifically setting goals and setting just like Herculean goals, but also then putting a plan behind it because anything's possible. And at that first event, I remember watching this parade of beautiful women walk across the stage. They had black suits on and he said, "This is my team. They're my right arm. They travel with me." And I had a thought cross my mind. I thought, oh my God, that would be my dream job, but I would never. Like the nevers started in immediately. It wasn't even a second sentence. It was like, but I never would because, I would never leave my family. I couldn't travel. And within a year, I was working for his organization and traveling around the world as one of his right arm people, trained by him as a coach. So I learned to break through those things and just sort of put the ridiculous as a goal in your mind and then figure out the details, figure out how you're going to get it. Because the reality is that the people that have those things, whatever things are, like in quotes, if it is the Maserati to one or the world traveling to another or the Oprah show to another, they only have it because they had a dream, a vision, and a good strategy. There's there's nothing, I don't want to say there's nothing more complicated. There's a lot of hard work and ingenuity that goes behind that. But I've seen it time and time again. If you're willing to commit to something, you can accomplish it.
Right. And when you first when your boyfriend said you need to go to this Tony Robbins thing, you were, as you said, a hot mess at the time. And yes, obviously, the emotional impact of what happened to your mother and the loss of her leaves you in a certain state going into this moment that you encounter Tony Robbins. And when you got there and you were there for the first few days and you were just saying, yeah, no, what was your belief system at that point before you had this moment where everything kind of clicked for you?
That's such an interesting question. So, I literally remember my parents saying, don't get your hopes up, you'll just be disappointed. So really don't shoot for anything because you'll just get disappointed. And so that was really my belief system. And so like my goal was to get through the end of the day. And I was very sad and I was grieving and I sort of inherited a 13-year-old little brother that, now didn't have a mom. And there were just so many things and so many responsibilities and nothing made sense. And I was just so different than anything else. And so I went in there and I just like what shifted for me was just sort of seeing these people. Like I would go out, for example, there's the fire walk and you had to walk around and walk up to a stranger and say your biggest fear. Mm-hmm. And these men, at the time they were like 50, seems so old, but back then when I started, and they were like CEOs of big global companies, and they'd have this fear. And I was thinking in my mind, that's so stupid. I'm not afraid of that. Mm-hmm. But yet my fear, whatever it was like Herculean, So for me, that was really the eye-opening thing. I was like, wait a minute. If that guy, with the yacht and the home and the 3 kids has that fear, and I don't have that one, but I've got this one, like, why do I even have this? Mm-hmm. And so that was really the turn of it for me, is really realizing that, like, wait a minute, we're kind of creating our own reality. We're kind of creating our own boundaries of what is possible and what's not. And then I really listened, like I saw my boyfriend, and then I remembered, hey, I actually have known him since he was 16 years old, and he was a landscaper, and he is a multimillionaire now. And I see his parents, and they're not any more wealthy, they don't have anything different than my parents have. So wait a minute, there might be something here. Mm-hmm. And so I just, the seed was planted there. And I think a little defiance, right? Because people, if you're always raised with like, you can't do that, don't get your hopes up. There's a little part, at least in me, that wanted to be like, screw you, I can do whatever I want. Mm-hmm. And so all of that kind of came together at the right time with the education to be able to put these goals out there. Now, mind you, it's been 20 years since that period of time. So there was a lot of evolution. There was constant growth, constant learning. I'm a voracious reader, learner, absorber, worker. But I would say that was really the impetus, is getting that awareness of like, I think they might be onto something here.
Right. And your boyfriend, when you compared his parents to your parents, was he getting the same messages that you were, or were his parents giving him a different kind of message that enabled him to, I'm guessing, move more quickly through this process of getting to the point where he had the success that he ultimately had? Or did he really go through the same evolution that you did?
Oh, I love your questions. I gotta dig back through the files. So I think the one thing that was different with him is that his father was an entrepreneur. So, well, mine was too, but in a family business. So business was talked about in our family, like at dinners and so forth. It was talked about. It was part of the discussion, part of the conversation. But where it was different is, I feel like, his name was Gary. His father was more of the pushing like anything is possible thing. And that I did not have. And so that was a very unique characteristic to him, which I think it's so fascinating to me, because I feel like, oh my gosh, if you just told someone that, what could happen?
Yeah.
Instead of the opposite.
Right, exactly. And the influence that parents have. I mean, it can just be one thing that they say, and it really does change the trajectory of their children's lives, and it's not always in a positive direction. And I'm curious if you're okay to share this. When you think about your parents at the time that they were basically giving you this message, don't get your hopes up, things aren't going to work out, what was going on for them, or what was the backstory with them that was their own mindset?
Ooh, I think that part of it is a little bit of product of time, right? So that was back in the 70s, 80s. My father worked for the family business, so he definitely followed in his father's footsteps. And I don't know that was his dream. Like in fact, I know that it wasn't. So there's probably some of that. Having done decades of introspective work and psychotherapy or whatever, there's also like, they want to protect you, they did. So there's all these things. And of course, parents want the best for you. They want you to be secure. They want you to be able to have a career that can support yourself. But also, to be fair too, like when I first came out of school, my first job in 1995, 96, it was pre-internet, pre-Google, pre-people with stock options, like all these things that all of a sudden came on the scene. And so, here's my dad getting whatever 2% raise every year from a family business. And all of a sudden his kid is like, our company just got bought by USA Networks and stock and all these things. And so, so it's a bit of all of it. It's a bit of the times, a bit of, my mom was a stay-at-home mom. Her passion was to become a nurse, but then, she got pregnant with me. So at some point gave that up and stayed at home. And so it just, they just weren't people that were living to their fullest capacity and to their fullest, living that dream life. So I feel that that's what was passed down to us.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. And I'm curious about, the transformation that took place in your own belief system. When you grow up with a belief system, it happens during your formative years, which defines the way you see things for the rest of your life for most people. And I'm curious about, you obviously had this moment when you were so young with attending this Tony Robbins event, and then within a year you're working for and with him. And I'm curious about how long it took for you to come to a point where you actually did not have any remnants left of that old belief system.
Oh, we're still working on that one.
You know what? It's funny, Bonnie. I didn't want to, that was my instinct. And I thought, no, that's really presumptuous of you to say, okay, where are you at in your life with your old belief system? Because I'm sure it's still like the echoes of it are there, but I didn't want to be so, I mean, that's pretty bold to say to somebody you don't know, but that is actually what my real question was.
Yeah, it's a constant evolution. I mean, I think any entrepreneur has to have some degree of that. Otherwise, none of us would do anything. We'd go get a job, we'd punch out at 5 p.m., slide down the dinosaur, and that would be a day, And so for me, it's like, I mean, I spend like 2/3 of the day convinced that we will be the next Instagram or Google or Facebook, and then the other third convinced that tomorrow the doors will shut and that's over, and that's an everyday thing. And so a little bit of that I think is powerful because that's what drives me to make the extra 10 calls at the end of the day or, do whatever it takes. And I think it's, I would love to be in someone else's brain. I would love to just trade brains for a day, like to someone that went to an Ivy League school and just has like a stable job and really secure 401k and all of those things that you're supposed to have. I would love to just see what actually goes on in their brain because I don't think I have that. I think part of that belief system is always there, but I'm so grateful for it because otherwise I would have taken a path that probably wouldn't be fulfilling. And that's one of the things people say, like, there are some things in my life that I don't have that I guess I don't want to say I wish I had because I would just really go get them if I wanted them that bad. But there's, because of the path I've taken, I don't have the white picket fence or a bunch of children running around yet. And so I feel like what the compliment I get from a lot of my friends that have that is how lucky I am because I've taken the path that I've taken. So yeah. So I think it's always there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so amazing when you talk about, the belief system that you grew up with and still the struggle with it. But I think that, and it's much to your point about there is something motivating about the kind of belief system that you grew up with and continue to be challenged by, because it really does motivate you to keep pushing, to keep going after this thing. And I don't know that it's so much this self-doubt or self-doubt in general as it is this thing where it's almost a scarcity kind of thing where you really want this thing, whatever that might be, but the voice inside you is saying, well, don't want it too much because it might not work out. And so there is actually a scarcity factor in there that I see there. And most people think of scarcity in terms of, I don't have enough food to eat or I don't make enough money and all that kind of stuff. But there is a scarcity that exists, I believe, in the belief and a way of moving to a place where you have more belief in what's happening than less belief and having to work so hard at it. And maybe that is the moment where the transition truly takes place or the transformation truly takes place in a person where that old belief system does finally transform into the new one, which is my guess what ultimately happens with working with Tony Robbins over a long period of time, where you really do integrate that into your, or you replace one belief system with another. And the one that you replace it with is the one that really is your destiny if you choose to go down the path of believing that that is possible.
I agree. Yeah. And it's all necessary. Again, like I don't know anyone's story that's accomplished great things that just had the perfect little life and the parents that just said, great job, you can do anything. Mm-hmm. It's generally more the stories of struggle and perseverance and overcoming that, create great success stories.
Right. I'm curious about something. I was at an event not too long ago where Tony Robbins was the keynote speaker, and he talked about his most recent book where he had interviewed all those, I think it was 40 billionaires or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he said that out of the 40 billionaires that he interviewed, he said only 3 of them were happy. And I thought that was really interesting. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on that there is this constant pursuit that we have, especially as Americans, where, we're constantly climbing up the corporate ladder, or it's, we're struggling to make that next dollar or next million. We're trying to build our companies, doing all the things that we're doing. We're this drive that pushes us forward. But for so many people, they end up feeling unhappy or unfulfilled. And it sounds like what has happened for you and all of the success that you've had, you really truly to a place where you feel really happy. And what do you think is the difference between yourself and these mega billionaires that end up not being happy, even with all that they have? What is the difference, do you think?
Well, I can only speak for me. In my experience, it's two things. Number one, going back to when I was 23 years old and I lost my mom, I was with her when she passed. And so I got to see the transition from living to not living. And my mind was just like, oh my God, nothing matters. Like the person that taught you to cross the street and tie your shoes is gone. And like, what's right, what's wrong, all these thoughts. And so for me, things were less important. And so when I say, like, for me, I really do want my company to be the next Facebook or Instagram or Google, I mean that. And I'll go for that with all of my gusto, but it's not, I don't want to say it's not important to me. It's incredibly important to me, but it's not important to the point where I would sacrifice anything else, because I understand those things don't mean anything. Like right. I will go for that goal, because why wouldn't you? Why would I just say, I want a mediocre media company? No, I'm going to shoot for the stars. But at the same point for me, I've seen that that's not the bee's knees. Like there's more to it in life, and appreciating the moment and not sacrificing. Like I make sacrifices every single day. Of course, I would have loved to stay in bed this morning until 8 and snuggle my doggy, but I got up at 5:30. I made coffee. I was walking the dog. I was at kickboxing. Like I make those types of sacrifices. But I think for me, knowing that life is futile and that things can change and transition in any minute, but also consciously choosing. Like, I think I also work very hard at being happy. Again, I would like to be in someone else's brain so I could compare, but like, it's a choice every day. And when I start to feel my thoughts go south, I have to manage it. I have to like get in there and like manipulate and be like, thank you. No, we're thinking about this now. And I have to I have vision boards and I have music and candles and I meditate most days. And so I think that it's important to choose all those things. And I think when things come to, I don't know these billionaire stories, but I have dated some incredibly wealthy men that are very miserable. And I think when things come easier to you, you don't appreciate them. And so appreciation is a big part of it. Gratitude's a big part of it. But also I think you need that contrast of knowing. Like for me, every time I see my dad or my brothers, I know that it could be the last time I ever see them. Yeah. And I only know that because it happened to me. And so people that haven't had that experience don't know what that means, but it's painful, but it also, you like feel hard, like you love harder, you feel more, you appreciate more too. Yeah. So I think all of that factors into it. And I wouldn't say I'm happy all the time. Like I definitely have my days. Jeez, I mean, you're really putting me on the spot here, Arlene. No, I'm kidding. But like, I really consciously choose it. And when I'm not happy, I know it's my fault. Like there's something I need to be doing different, or I had too much sugar or too much cake or wine, or I didn't sleep enough, or, and then I forgive myself and I move on. But yeah, I do work at it every single day and I consciously choose.
That's beautiful. And I had two thoughts here. One of which is obviously anyone who suffers a loss or experiences a loss like the one that you did at the age you were, it's life altering, and it's so devastating that it really does change the trajectory of your life. And then it becomes a question of what do you decide to do with that? And it's really remarkable that you came out of that experience to go in the direction that you did with the approach that you did. And one thing I did want to touch on with something you just said was this piece about when your thoughts go south. And I find that really compelling, because I think that you know, when we see really successful people, we think that they have better control of their thoughts than we do. And we don't actually believe they have those self-limiting belief thoughts or questioning themselves or anything that might look less than how they appear on the outside. But with you just talking about, you know, your thoughts going south, talk a little bit about when that happens to you. What is the process? And yes, of course, you just touched on those things, but I think that for anybody who struggles in their life with this whole issue of their thoughts running away with them and the kind of damage that does, how do you get on top of that as quickly as it seems like you do?
Oh man, tools. So I used to have this when I worked for Tony Robbins for this one period of time. I had to get up at 4:15 every morning and open the health center. I lived on Fiji, and I hated it because my boyfriend at the time got to sleep in till 10. Like, it was just awful. So the second I woke up, my mind would, you know, it's like a monster in there talking to you. And I programmed my mind to sing Rise and Shine. Like, the second I woke up, and I wouldn't stop until I was in the shower. So once you get in the shower and then you're like, okay, fine, I'm already halfway there. Like, I'll just keep going.
Finish the song.
But yeah, but then like so now that's ingrained in my mind. Like, I did that for years. And so the second I wake up, that is part of my thought process. Mm-hmm. This is going to seem a little crazy, but you know, I sleep with my puppy. Every morning when I wake up, I look at her and I tell her what's going to happen today. Like, I say good morning. I say today's going to be awesome. And then I tell her the whole day, and I walk what meetings we're going to have, if we're going to close some special deals, we're going to go to the park. This is going to happen. And I do that to state it so it's out there. It's like, she doesn't really care. She just cares about the park word. But I say it so that I have verbally committed to those goals. And then for me, like, I live in this beautiful home. It has like 18-foot glass wall on the front. And on the bottom floor, it's all chalk pen. So I write out my goals every single day. And I have my bigger goal. Like, for our company right now, we're trying to get to a certain number of channels. And so every day, that's my focus. So if other things are creeping in, like, not everything's perfect right now. I'm going through a breakup of a relationship, like some other things are going on. But if I can shift my focus from that, the moment the thoughts start to, I wonder what he's already didn't call. I just all of a sudden look at the numbers. I'm like, ooh, what could I do right now to affect this? Mm-hmm. And I just have to sort of shift my focus. It's like a kid, you know, when they're crying and you take something away, you have to replace it with something else. So I'm constantly replacing with something else. And then we're not even down the stairs yet. My God, we've only gotten out of bed, talked to the dog, and we're at the chalk drawer. And then before I get to the coffee and then meditate, it's a lot of work, I'm telling you. I have a vision board. I have a big hot pink vision board, and Oprah is on that. And I've got all my goals written out for the year. So I start to focus on that. And while the coffee is being made, I look at that. I imagine how it's going to feel. And then by then you're in such a good mood. Like, who cares about whatever, you know? And so then you go on your day in that frame versus wherever you are. And right. I'm a big advocate. People always say, like, don't check your phone the first half hour, all of those things. Like, I have to really force myself not to check my phone until after I've worked out, and not because otherwise you let your day control you. And I like to be in control of the day.
Absolutely.
So those things are important. You know, it's the basics. It's like getting enough sleep, eating well, making sure that you're eating more healthy foods than not healthy foods. It's like all those things too factor into it. But for me, having strategies the moment that I know. And another one, I won't answer the phone if I'm cranky pants. And like, when you have a company, there's a billion things a day to set you off. Trust me. And so, but I won't, like, if it's a friend, if it's my brother or one of my best friends, I won't answer if I'm in that mood, because then that's what they're going to get, you know, and then that's their experience of me. So I wait. And I don't like jump because someone called. I wait. When I'm in a better mood, I call them back, or I'll do like a text voice thing, and I'll send them a really lovely message, because then I don't have to interact. So strategies like that, they may sound simple, but they're very powerful when you practice them over and over again. Right. And, you know, boundaries are really important too. Like, our company grew so fast. And so there were so many people that had direct access to me and that had my personal cell phone number. And so all day long, you're getting communication. And I used to always just react. And now I set boundaries. We don't do phone support. If I get a voicemail, then I email the person back and say, this is the most effective way. Here's your support person. But those things were all learned because they were draining my energy and they were making me not a happy person. So now I just follow those and I'm very happy.
And when you have those things happening that, can hijack you in different ways, a lot of times our thoughts can hijack us, situations can hijack us, and we find ourselves going off the rails. Is it your approach when these things are happening that you're able to, at this point, with all the work that you've done, you're actually able to identify, oh, this is a trigger, or, oh, this is what this is going to result in, and immediately change or shift gears in that moment in response to that and know exactly what you need to do in response to it so that it doesn't hijack you?
Before I answer, will this podcast include interviews from anyone on my team?
Well, I don't know anybody on your team, so I think you're in really good, safe hands.
Okay. Okay, then. Yes, of course.
On my show. I won't tell anyone.
No, I think, I try. Like, I'm human. I try. I had a friend one time that taught me the 24-hour rule. Don't respond to a very heated email within 24 hours because you'll feel differently. So I really do try to implement those things, but you're still triggered. And here's the thing that I think people expect when they go to all these personal development workshops and they buy a book and they pay for a seminar, they expect that those things aren't going to happen. And I don't know. I mean, people say you can change them, but I've worked really hard and paid a lot of money and I still get triggered very easily. Where the difference is knowing how to respond to that and not react. And it, again, sounds so simple, but I really do try to put perspective in. And for me too, like I've worked in my day for some terrors, like I'll just be honest about that. And it was awful. And it was, a very bad experience. And in my mind, I'll just think, oh my God, I'm their X person like that, if I'm reacting that way. So I really do try. And the reality too is that, regardless, if the house is on fire, that's a big problem. But the other things generally aren't as big as we make them in the moment. And remembering that is so important because it's so easy to just, but when you pull back and most of the time it's not even what you think. Like I'll go back and I'll reread a text and I'm like, oh, it actually didn't say that. But my mind played it in a certain tone, because we're so ingrained to our patterns and we're so addicted in some ways to that, response or fight or kind of thing. And then I go back and I look, I'm like, oh, there was actually a smiley emoticon. I thought, oh, okay.
That whole fight or flight thing that automatically happens when we get triggered. And, it's like we lose our minds in that moment and we do not have the ability to think rationally in that moment because we are either fighting or we're fleeing. And it's always going to be bad for us.
It's so true. And allowing yourself the freedom. Like this week, I had an especially cray week because I was, at New Media Summit where you and I met. And then I was home for 3 days. And then I was on a digital marketing cruise where I spoke for 7 days and I came back. And I was like, okay, May is all fitness. I'm not going to drink any wine. I'm not going to go out at all. I'm going to work. And by yesterday, day 8, I was literally crawling out of my skin. So I texted a coworker upstairs and I was like, happy hour, and I just said, forget it. Like what's going to charge me right now is to completely screw off, go get some wine, get some spaghetti, have some laughs, and then start it all tomorrow at 5:30 up again. But so allowing also those sort of things where I used to be very black and white. I was like, I'm either vegan or I'm eating donuts, and now I'm kind of like, well, I'm vegan most days and then I have a cheeseburger, so allowing I think it's wisdom, it's like just knowing like, oh, well, no one's really checking.
It's like getting control of your inner drill sergeant.
Yeah. And knowing how to manage it. It's like managing a child. Sometimes, you have to know, does this child need a nap? Do they need a snack? Do they need a roller coaster? Like what do they need? And I used to be a coach, and that was one of the things I'd always teach people, like, you need to manage yourself like a 4-year-old. And by doing that, it's quite successful because we act like it a lot of times.
That's exactly right. Especially when we get triggered, we are in that fight or flight mode. And that's the behavior of a 4-year-old who's having a temper tantrum.
Exactly.
That's so funny. I can't speak. I had like 9 things I could say at exactly the same moment, and then everything seizes up and I can't say a single one of them. But I just looked at the clock and I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Really? There's no way. But I just wanted to ask you a few remaining questions. And then I want to talk, if you have a few minutes, I really want to talk about binge networks, because I know a lot of my listeners would be very, very interested in this. And so I do want to touch on that. I want to ask you, when you go back to that 23-year-old who is sitting in the pool of emotions associated with losing her mother, and you fast forward to where you are today, I have 2 questions, one of which is, did you ever imagine at that time that you would be where you are today and have had the success that you've had? And also, from 23 to where you are today, what do you think is the most interesting thing that you've learned along the way? Doesn't have to be most important, just the most interesting thing.
Okay. So looking back to the 23-year-old, hell to the no. I mean, I just, at that point I was still living in my hometown where I grew up. I'd been to college and back, but, the majority of my friends live within like a mile radius of their parents' home in that small town. And so for me, I think I'm seen as like this rogue, people don't, my dad still, when he calls, he says, "Where in the world are you, babe?" That's how he answers the phone. I'm like, "Dad, I stopped traveling like 10 years ago." But like no one ever knows, and at Christmas they're like, "What city do you live in now?" But so I would never imagine that this was possible. I would never imagine that I would pick up and move to New York City at 40 and live there and start a media company. And now I would never imagine living in Miami, it's crazy. So I can't even speak to that other than saying like, I had no clue. And then, it's like it's a black and a white thing. I'm always surprised about people's capabilities. Like I'm a driver and I'm a nightmare to work for. And I apologize if any of my staff is listening, because I just push. But I do it for a good reason. And it was done to me. Like it was done to me by Tony Robbins. It was done to me by Harvey McKay. And I appreciate it now. So I run at a fast clip and I expect a lot. And people always thank me, or I'm sure they probably hate me, but no, I'm kidding. But I'm always even surprised with that, the way people can shine. Like when you got to meet Erica, one of our staff members, and like when you just let her shine and do what she's great at, she's amazing. She's in New York this week representing us at DigimarCon, and it's the first event that I've not been present at. And I was like, why would I go? She's 10 times better than I am at this. And so that part is really awesome. And then on the other hand, sometimes that is the same answer on the other end of the spectrum. I'm surprised a lot sometimes by people, and what they can do when you've had business dealings gone wrong, or ventures, or, people promising the world and then they don't actually back it up. Because for me, if I say something, I intend to do it. And so regardless, I know sometimes things aren't possible or life gets in the way, but I really am appreciative when people are authentic and they do follow through and back up what they said they're going to do. Because that can be rare sometimes. And that's, I feel like every time it happens, I'm disappointed. I'm like, really? It's time number 7,428, like, come on. But
oh God, no kidding. Isn't that the truth? One last question on your journey here, is that you have matured to the point that you're at right now, just in terms of your own personal development and growth. and where you are in your life emotionally. And you mentioned that, you're going through this breakup right now, which is always deeply painful. When you think about where you are today and where you're going next, how do you see yourself evolving, and where do you think that takes you? And I don't mean in terms of your work. I mean that more in terms of who you are as a person, who has just continued to evolve over time.
Yeah, great question. It's a tricky question right now because life has been interesting the last 3 or 4 years in the personal life spectrum. I had a couple of failed adoptions, and I thought that I would be at a different place right now. I thought I would be a mom. I thought I would be, managing business. And then I went through a period where okay, maybe that's not going to be part of my life. And I think for me now, I'm open to that again, however family shows up, not necessarily myself. But so I definitely think in the next couple of years that will be a part of it. And for some reason, all the experiences, everything that I've gone through in the last couple of years, especially, I really feel ready to parent, however that shows up, but with the knowledge that I've gained. So before, I think it was just something I wanted because I want this. It's on my vision board. I want a family. And now I really am starting to see, especially after building a company, I have learned a lot of principles. And going back to what we talked about in the beginning, if someone just said every morning, hey, make it a great day. You can do anything if you put your mind to it. I feel like that's all you would need to do. Here's your cereal. Have a nice day. I'm sure it's more complicated, but I don't know, because I had some pretty messed up things happen. And I'm like, if someone just did those 2 things, I'm pretty sure I could have turned out amazing. So I think that will be part of my journey. Definitely relationship. I like to be, I'm such an independent person and a solo roller and a creator, but I do also love to share with somebody. So I think that will be a part of my journey. And then we have really big goals for the company. So I imagine, there's going to be massive growth with that. And I'm very open to whatever form that takes, whatever, growth, whatever, if there's a merger, if there's an acquisition, but really just I'm ready to sort of step up. I feel like for a long time, I was in such mad fury, the fire hose was just directly on me, especially when we were doing production. So it was just all you could see. And now I really kind of it's still that way, but I have a bird's eye view. And so I can see that there's a lot of possibilities that could happen here, especially where Binge is positioned now. And so that's exciting to me. I think it used to scare me. And now I'm like, well, maybe we end up in China. Whatever, we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. And that's really kind of cool, I think, to be at that place, to have an idea of what I want, but then just to know, hey, well, nothing else has turned out the way I thought. So we'll see.
And what a hell of a ride you've had, and you're still on it, and it's going to continue. How magnificent, Bonnie. Now, real quick, I want to talk about binge networks and how it applies. Many of my listeners may have podcasts. They may be doing a lot of stuff on social media. They may be making video for YouTube, or they may not be doing any of those things, but may find what you're doing really fascinating that might spur them to do something. Can you walk me through briefly just how this works for somebody who's brand new to podcasting, for an example?
Absolutely. So what it is it's an exposure vehicle. So we have a multi-channel network, which is just a fancy term for a site like YouTube or Netflix. And so we build a channel for each person. So for example, you will have your own channel for your podcast, and then you're able to upload content as you like, whether that's a video, it's a podcast, you just place it on your channel. And then our technology syndicates that or distributes that on 50 different media platforms. So you do that one night, you go to bed, you wake up in the morning, and we can find that video on Apple, on Roku, on Sony, on Samsung, and on sites all around the world. Television networks actually all around the world. And the reason that that's important for people is that right now, social media is oversaturated. It's noisy. It's complicated. You're trying to get your voice out there. We're tapping into these markets that have hundreds of millions of subscribers in some cases, and we're putting your content out there so that you get this exposure that people aren't tapped into yet. So it really just helps people reach a new audience and helps them achieve whatever goals they have. We're repurposing the content you're creating so that you can either get more clients or get more downloads to your podcast or sell more books. And it's been a really incredible experience. And the reason that I made it is I had a talk show, like I said, and it's really fun being the star of your own show. I'm not going to lie. Like, it's really awesome. And people wanted, it's like you're a little famous and people recognize you, and everyone wanted their own show. And I was like, okay, like that's something I know how to give you. I can teach you how to have your own show. So that's really why we created Binge, to give everybody the limelight and to give everybody that opportunity and to separate them from just YouTube or just, it's a little bit more of a higher echelon. Like our content is curated and we have specific genres. Most listeners to your podcast would fit into our genres, definitely. But yeah, it's really just, it's kind of like Netflix for the everyday person, but we also put you everywhere. Like we put you on all these television networks. So it's pretty exciting.
Wow. And anybody can do this. Is that correct? Oh my God. Holy
Sorry, I just took a sip of water.
Talk about the holy grail for the everyday person. I mean, it really, truly is the great leveler, It
is. Yeah, it really is. And as long as you're creating content, and that doesn't have to be complicated. Like you can create really good video content with your phone and $100 light off of Amazon, and we'll teach you how to do it. Yeah. So it's really, I wanted to give these people, like I had a crazy ride. I had a crazy experience where I was in New York, in homes, on cable, and I was on all the subways and, and I was like, this is great. Everyone should do it. And that's really what we created. And, right now we have over 200 people that we've helped with that goal. Wow. And so maybe that isn't your goal to be the next Oprah. Maybe you just want to sell a couple more books, or maybe you just want to get a few more people to download your podcast. But whatever your goal is, Binge can be that exposure vehicle for you.
Wow, how magnificent. Well, I'm going to make sure to put all of the links and everything in the show notes. But if people are interested in learning more about you or contacting you about Binge Networks or anything else they might be interested in that might have something to do with you, where can they find you?
Sure. BingeNetworks.tv. That's where I hang out. That's the network. Pretty much every social media known to man is on there. You can find me. And then also our phone number and good old fashioned email address is on the site. So you can reach me there.
Excellent. And as we wrap this up, with the listeners of my show, they can be at pretty much any stage of their development in what they're doing in their business or in their relationships or other parts of their life and so forth. And they find themselves, they've hit a wall, or they are experiencing a roadblock that they just simply can't move past and get to a point where they know what their next move is. Do you have any thoughts on how they can approach whatever situation they're in and get themselves to a point where they can unlock what is happening to them and move forward and take their next step?
I do. Vision and clarity is the most important thing. So knowing what you want, whatever that is, whether it's to find a relationship, get out of a relationship, grow a business, sell a business, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But having that clarity of vision is so important. And then really just taking one step, like whatever it is, take one step forward each day. If you're even doing one little thing, if you're, I'll find myself sometimes when you're just in that, like the worst blues, and I'll go, oh my God, what could I do right now? I could go for a run. Okay. And then you'll feel better, So it's like, just have an idea of where you're heading and then take a step in that direction, and don't mope in it. Don't, where you are is where you are. There's nothing you can do to change it. There's nothing you can do. Not staying there is not going to make it any better. Trust me. So it's just a matter of just doing that one thing. And then when you consistently do one thing, I had a thought this morning. It's so funny. Like, I'm so aggressive, even in my goals. I'm like, I have to go to kickboxing 4 days a week. And then I've been on a cruise, and I've been in San Diego, and I've been eating and drinking and whatever I want. So I heard that voice started to come back today. I was like, you know what? Shut up. I'm exactly where I need to be. And in 2 weeks after I've come here 3 days a week, everything's going to be fine. Like, instead of all the things we tell ourselves, but I'm like, there's nothing I can do. I did consume like 4,500 calories a day on the cruise. So this is what happened. Like, let's just deal with it.
Oh my God. Bonnie, you are so delightful and magnificent. It's been the best hour. I'm telling you the truth. This has just been glorious.
I've had so much fun. I know I don't want to go.
Well, I could talk to you all day long because, as is always the case, whenever, someone starts just sharing with me, what their life has been made up of, I always find it really fascinating. And to just go back to the origins of who that person is and what shaped them and what ultimately happened to them. And I just find the journey that they go on to be really, really fascinating. And yours has been absolutely splendid. And you've been such a delightful guest. I thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. It's been so much fun hanging out with you.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Well, everyone, at the end of every episode, I always ask you to think about where you're at in your life right now and ask yourself the question, what's your next move? I'm Arlene Battishill. Thanks so much for listening. I'll be back with another episode. Welcome to What's Your Next Move, the podcast for peak performers who are making things happen but are running into roadblocks that prevent them from getting what they want. Whether you work for someone else, you're an entrepreneur, thinking about starting your own business, or at a point in your life where you just can't make the move from where you are to where you want to go, you're in the right place. This podcast is all about answering one question: what's your next move? And helping you harness your power so your next move is the one that changes your life. I'm your host and resident provocateur, Arlene Battishill, and I want to know, what's your next move?